Good evening. Tonight we explore the world of Serial Experiments Lain, a tale of identity, connection, and the dissolving boundaries between what we call reality and the vast digital realm that grows more powerful with each passing day. Let yourself relax as we delve deep into this haunting universe of humming power lines, flickering screens, and a quiet girl who discovers she may be something far more than human. Before you begin drifting off to sleep, do consider subscribing to the channel for more anime sleep stories. There are many more of your favorite anime worlds to peacefully explore together. And now, on with our story. The world of Serial Experiments Lain exists in a version of late 1990s Japan, where technology has begun threading itself through the fabric of daily existence in ways both subtle and profound. The streets of suburban Tokyo hum with electricity carried through power lines that crisscross overhead, like the nervous system of some vast and unknowable organism. These lines carry more than simple current. They carry data, voice, image, and increasingly, something harder to define. They carry the pulse of a new kind of existence that humanity has only begun to create and cannot yet fully comprehend. The global communications network known as the Wired represents the pinnacle of this technological development. Unlike the simple telephone networks that preceded it, the Wired offers something approaching total connectivity. Users can send messages instantaneously across continents, access archives of information that dwarf the greatest libraries, and participate in communities that exist entirely within the digital realm. For most people, this network serves as tool and convenience, something used for work and entertainment, without much thought given to its deeper implications. The assumption underlying this casual usage holds that clear and obvious boundaries separate the digital world from the physical one. People believe they can log on and log off, enter the Wired and leave it behind, maintain distinct identities in each realm without contamination or confusion. This comfortable certainty pervades everyday interaction with technology, allowing people to embrace its benefits, whilst ignoring questions about what such pervasive connectivity might mean for human existence and identity. This certainty will not survive the events that follow. The story opens on a crowded evening in Tokyo's Shibuya district, where neon lights paint the streets in colors that seem almost alive. People move through this urban landscape in rivers and streams, their faces illuminated by signs advertising products and experiences, their attention divided between physical surroundings and the devices many carry. Among these crowds moves a teenage girl whose presence goes largely unnoticed despite what she is about to do. Chisa Yomoda appears unremarkable in most respects. She wears a school uniform similar to thousands of other students, carries herself with neither particular confidence nor obvious distress, and navigates the crowded streets with the automatic competence of someone who has made this journey many times before. Nothing in her appearance suggests that tonight will be different from any other night, that she has reached a decision that defies conventional understanding of what a young person might choose. She finds her way to a rooftop, the specific path she takes lost to observation. The city spreads beneath her in a vast grid of light and shadow, millions of lives playing out in the buildings and streets below. From this height, the individual dramas of human existence blur into patterns of movement and illumination, specific persons becoming indistinguishable from the general flow of urban life. Chisa looks out at this vista with an expression that observers might later describe as peaceful, though peaceful seems an inadequate word for the strange calm that settles over her features. What happens next occurs quickly, but reverberates slowly through the lives it touches. Chisa steps forward into empty air, her body falling through the night past floor after floor of offices and apartments, where people continue their ordinary activities, unaware of what is happening just outside their windows. She lands on the street below, amid shattered glass and scattered debris, her impact drawing screams from nearby pedestrians and starting the chain of responses that such incidents inevitably trigger. Emergency services arrive, crowds gather and disperse. Investigators document and analyze. The machinery of society processes this death as it processes countless others, filing reports and notifying family, and eventually releasing a body for burial. Within the official record, Chisa Yomoda becomes another statistic. Another young person lost to whatever combination of factors leads teenagers to such desperate acts. However, something unusual happens in the week following these events. Students throughout Chisa's school begin receiving electronic messages that bear her name and address. These communications arrive through the wired, through email accounts that should have been deactivated, and systems that should have been secured against such impossibilities. The messages speak in first person, claiming to be from Chisa herself, asserting that her death represents transition rather than termination. The content of these messages introduces concepts that will prove central to everything that follows. Chisa writes of having abandoned her body because it was no longer necessary, of continuing to exist within the wired in a form freed from physical limitation. She speaks of God being present within the network, of understanding that will eventually come to everyone, of connection that transcends the boundaries most people assume to be absolute. Her words carry certainty that seems inconsistent with prank or hoax, suggesting genuine belief in claims that should be impossible to make. The school responds to these messages with the careful management that institutions bring to uncomfortable situations. Counselors speak with students about grief and its strange manifestations. Administrators investigate potential security breaches that might explain how someone could send messages under a deceased student's identity. Teachers watch for signs of distress among those who knew Chisa, ready to intervene if the situation appears to be affecting anyone's well-being. Among those who receive these strange communications is a girl named Lain Iwakura. Lain occupies a peculiar position within the social landscape of her school. She is known in the sense that her classmates recognize her face and can produce her name if asked. But she is not truly known in any deeper sense. She moves through her days with minimal interaction, speaking only when directly addressed, and often not even then. Her expression carries a quality of distance that makes others uncertain how to approach her, as though she is always looking at something just beyond what everyone else can see. The other students have developed various explanations for Lain's strangeness. Some believe she is simply shy, her quietude reflecting social anxiety that might be overcome with patience and encouragement. Others suspect she considers herself superior, her silence expressing disdain for conversations she finds beneath her interest. A few wonder if something might be wrong with her in some clinical sense, her disconnection from normal teenage concerns suggesting developmental differences that polite people do not discuss directly. None of these explanations quite captures the truth of Lain's experience, which she herself would struggle to articulate if asked. She exists in a state of perpetual, mild dissociation, present in her surroundings, but never fully engaged with them. The concerns that animate her classmates, their social dramas and academic pressures and romantic interests, register as distant noise rather than meaningful signal. She watches others live their lives without feeling particularly connected to the same stream of experience. The Iwakura household provides context for understanding how Lain came to inhabit this psychological space. The family occupies a comfortable suburban home that contains all the material provisions necessary for adequate living, whilst lacking something essential that proves harder to name. The spaces are clean and organized, the appliances modern and functional, the overall impression one of sufficient prosperity. Yet something about the atmosphere suggests emptiness rather than abundance, as though the house itself is waiting for something that has never arrived. The rhythms of daily life within the Iwakura home follow patterns that emphasize disconnection rather than togetherness. Meals occur at scheduled times, the family gathering around a table that feels too large for the sparse conversation it hosts. Lain's mother serves food with movements that suggest long practice rather than care, placing dishes before family members without comment or acknowledgement. Her father eats whilst reviewing technical documents or contemplating problems that exist entirely within his own mind, his physical presence at the table contradicted by his obvious mental absence. Lain has learned to navigate these mealtimes by minimizing her own presence, eating quietly, and excusing herself as soon as politeness permits. She has never known family dinners to be otherwise, has no framework for understanding that other households might operate differently. The silence that pervades their shared meals seems natural to her, the expected condition of people who happen to live in proximity without having chosen each other's company. Her bedroom has become her refuge from even this minimal family interaction. The space is small, but sufficient for someone whose needs have contracted to match what isolation provides. She has arranged her few possessions with care that suggests attachment to order rather than to the objects themselves. The stuffed animals lined along her windowsill represent gifts from occasions she barely remembers, their presence maintained from habit rather than affection. The view from her window encompasses the neighborhood's power lines, cables stretching between poles in patterns that have become so familiar she no longer consciously sees them. These lines carry electricity to homes throughout the district, their constant presence providing the infrastructure that modern life requires. Lain has spent hours staring at them without knowing why they draw her attention, something in their configuration speaking to her in ways she cannot articulate. Lain's father, Yasuo Iwakura, represents the most animated presence in this household, though his animation flows in directions that do little to warm the family atmosphere. He loves computers and networks with passion that approaches religious devotion, filling his study with equipment and spending hours immersed in the wired, whilst showing limited interest in the human beings who share his living space. When he speaks with his daughters, his words tend toward the technical rather than emotional, his engagement flickering to life only when conversations turn towards subjects related to his obsession. Her mother, Miho Iwakura, presents the opposite extreme of emotional expression. Where Yasuo at least becomes animated about technology, Miho maintains consistent flatness across all circumstances. She performs the tasks of motherhood and household management with mechanical competence, whilst revealing nothing of interior life or feeling. Her face remains expressionless, whether delivering good news or bad, her voice maintaining the same measured tone, regardless of what she is saying. Interacting with her is like interacting with a sophisticated automaton, one that produces appropriate responses without any evident inner experience driving those responses. Mika Iwakura, Lain's older sister, has responded to this family environment by constructing an external life that compensates for what home lacks. She maintains active social connections, stays out late with friends, engages with fashion and popular culture, and all the normal concerns of teenage girlhood. Her confidence and social competence stand in stark contrast to Lain's withdrawal, suggesting either different responses to shared circumstances, or perhaps fundamental differences in temperament that would manifest regardless of environment. The relationship between the sisters carries undertones of tension that neither directly addresses. Mika seems to view Lain with a mixture of confusion and mild contempt, unable to understand why her younger sister refuses to engage with the world in normal ways. She makes comments that edge toward cruelty, observations about Lain's strangeness delivered with the casual brutality that siblings sometimes inflict on each other. Lain receives these comments with the same apparent indifference she shows to everything else, her lack of reaction perhaps frustrating Mika more than any response would. Within this family context, Lain has developed habits of solitude that now feel natural and necessary. She retreats to her room whenever possible, finding in privacy a relief from the effort of navigating interpersonal dynamics she does not understand. Her bedroom contains little beyond basic furniture, the walls bare and the space is empty in ways that might suggest either minimalist taste or simple inability to imagine wanting more. A small computer sits on her desk, a gift from some forgotten occasion that she has rarely used. The message from Chisa arrives on this neglected machine during an evening that begins like any other. Lain has returned from school through her usual route, avoiding conversation with family members and closing herself into her room with the quiet relief that solitude brings. Something, perhaps simple curiosity, or perhaps something less explicable, prompts her to turn on the computer and check the email account she almost never uses. The machine hums to life with sounds that seem louder in the silence of her room. The screen flickers through startup processes whilst Lain watches with an attention she does not usually bring to technological interactions. When her email program opens, she sees a notification indicating new messages waiting for her attention. One message bears the name Chisa Yomoda as its sender. Lain knows, as everyone at school knows, that Chisa is dead. She attended the memorial assembly, sat through the counselor's presentation about processing grief, overheard the whispered conversations of classmates trying to understand why someone their own age would choose to end her life. Dead people do not send emails. This fact seems so obvious as to require no statement, a foundational assumption about how reality operates. Yet, here is a message from someone who should be incapable of sending messages. Lain opens the email with a mixture of curiosity and unease that represents more emotional engagement than she typically experiences. The words that appear on her screen speak directly to her, addressing her by name, referencing a specific shared moment that only Chisa would know about. The message mentions a time when the two girls walked home together, a brief and unremarkable interaction that Lain barely remembers, but that apparently made impression enough on Chisa to warrant mention from beyond death. The content that follows this personal opening ventures into territory that Lain cannot easily categorize or dismiss. Chisa writes of having given up her body, of continuing to exist within the wired, of understanding that will eventually come to everyone. She speaks of God being present in the network, of connection that transcends physical limitation, of a different way of being that she has discovered through her apparent death. Her words combine the personal and the cosmic in ways that resist easy interpretation. Lain reads these words multiple times, trying to determine what they might mean and how she should respond to them. The obvious explanations, that someone is playing a cruel prank or that the school's email system has been compromised by hackers, seem inadequate to account for the specific details and strange certainty the message contains. Something about the communication feels authentic in ways that Lain cannot quite articulate, as though the words carry weight that mere imitation could not achieve. She finds herself typing a response, her fingers moving over keys she has rarely touched, formulating a question that emerges from somewhere deeper than conscious decision. She asks Chisa why, a simple word that contains multitudes of confusion and something that might be genuine interest. Why did you do it? Why are you contacting me? Why should I believe any of this is real? The reply arrives almost instantly, as though Chisa has been waiting for exactly this question. Her answer speaks of bodies being unnecessary, of the wired offering possibilities that physical existence cannot match, of freedom found through abandoning the limitations that flesh imposes. She tells Lain that understanding will come, that everyone will eventually comprehend what she has discovered, that the boundaries most people assume to be absolute are already beginning to dissolve. This exchange marks the beginning of Lain's transformation from passive observer to active participant in events that will reshape her understanding of everything. The dead girl's words plant seeds of curiosity that Lain's isolation has prevented from finding purchase before. Here is something that demands attention, mystery that invites investigation, communication that seems to reach across impossible distances to touch her specifically. The following day at school brings confirmation that Lain's experience is not unique. Her classmate Alice Mizuki approaches during lunch, her expression carrying concern mixed with something harder to identify. Alice is known for kindness that extends even to those whom others overlook, her gentle nature making her perhaps the closest thing to a friend that Lain possesses. she has maintained patient interest in Lain, despite receiving little encouragement, continuing to offer connection without demanding reciprocation. Alice asks if Lain also received the strange message, her voice low enough to avoid being overheard by others. The question confirms that whatever happened to Lain happened to many students, the dead girl's communication reaching throughout her former social network. Alice reports that reactions have varied widely, from dismissal as obvious prank to genuine disturbance at the implications of receiving mail from the deceased. The conversation introduces Lain to perspectives on the situation that differ from her own solitary contemplation. Alice speaks of the messages being discussed throughout the school, of theories proposed and rejected, of unease that pervades interactions even among those who claim not to believe anything supernatural is occurring. She mentions that some students have tried responding to the messages, receiving replies that contain information only Chisa would know, details that mere hackers could not have accessed. Lain listens to this account with an attention she rarely shows to social conversation. The information Alice provides expands her understanding of what she is dealing with, suggesting phenomena that extend beyond her individual experience to touch a broader community. She finds herself wanting to know more, to investigate further, to understand what is happening and why it seems to be happening to her specifically. This curiosity leads to a conversation with her father that evening, an interaction unusual enough that Yasuo seems genuinely surprised by his daughter's initiative. Lain asks for a new computer, explaining that she has become interested in exploring the wired more thoroughly. Her father's response to this request reveals layers that Lain does not yet know how to interpret. Yasuo agrees to provide the equipment with enthusiasm that seems disproportionate to the request. His eyes brighten in ways they rarely do during family interactions, his words flowing more freely as he discusses specifications and capabilities and possibilities. He speaks of the wired as though describing a beloved country, its landscapes and inhabitants, and hidden wonders laid out for his daughter's future exploration. Yet alongside this enthusiasm comes warning that Lain files away without fully understanding. Her father cautions her about maintaining distinction between the wired and the real world, about remembering that the network is merely a tool for communication rather than a replacement for physical existence. His words echo concerns that might be expected from any parent worried about a child's internet usage. Yet something in his tone suggests he is speaking from specific knowledge rather than general caution. Lain responds to this warning with words that surprise them both. She tells her father that she thinks he is wrong, that the distinction he describes may not be as clear as he believes. The statement emerges from somewhere beneath conscious thought, expressing intuition that Lain herself does not fully understand. Her father receives this challenge with an expression that flickers through several emotions, too quickly to identify before settling into something that might be concern or might be recognition. The new computer arrives within days, a Navi system that represents technology far beyond what an ordinary teenager would require. Lain sets up this equipment in her room with assistance from her father, learning basic operations and configuration, whilst absorbing information about the wired's structure and possibilities. The machine offers capabilities that seem almost magical compared to her previous limited computing experience, processing power and connectivity that open doors she did not know existed. Her first serious explorations of the wired reveal a landscape far more complex than she had imagined. The network contains not merely information repositories and communication channels, but entire communities that exist only in digital space. People gather in virtual locations to discuss interests and share experiences, forming bonds that transcend physical proximity. Some of these communities focus on ordinary concerns, hobbies and entertainment, and professional networking. Others venture into stranger territory, discussing phenomena that mainstream society dismisses as impossible. The communities she discovers within the wired operate according to social rules that differ from those governing physical interaction. Anonymity permits honesty that face-to-face conversation inhibits, people sharing thoughts and experiences they would never reveal to those who know their names and faces. This honesty cuts in multiple directions, enabling both genuine connection and cruelty that physical presence would restrain. Lain finds herself drawn to discussions of phenomena that mainstream discourse dismisses as impossible or delusional. These conversations treat strange experiences as worthy of serious analysis, rather than immediate rejection. Participants share accounts of events that defy conventional explanation, building collective understanding through aggregation of individual testimony. The epistemological standards differ from those academia would accept, yet the discussions carry rigor of their own sort. The concept of the wired as a space, rather than merely a tool, emerges from these explorations. Users speak of locations within the network, places that can be visited and inhabited in ways that transcend simple web page browsing. These locations possess atmosphere and character, their qualities shaped by the interactions that occur within them. Some spaces welcome newcomers, whilst others require credentials or invitation. The geography of the wired proves as complex as that of any physical territory. Lain finds herself drawn to these stranger corners of the wired, to discussions of events that defy conventional explanation and theories that challenge assumptions about reality's nature. She reads accounts of experiences that echo her own, communications from the dead and blurring of boundaries between physical and digital existence. She discovers that Chisa's messages fit within a larger pattern of phenomena that has been occurring with increasing frequency, as though something fundamental about the relationship between humans and their technology is shifting. These discoveries coincide with social developments that draw Lain further from her accustomed isolation. Her classmates Alice, Rika, and Yuri mention plans to visit a nightclub called Siberia, a venue known for attracting young people interested in technology and alternative culture. The invitation to join them comes with mention of a specific reason for Lain's potential interest. Someone matching her appearance has been seen at this club, behaving in ways completely inconsistent with the quiet girl they know. The report of a doppelganger disturbs Lain more than she shows to her classmates. She has no memory of visiting any nightclub, no explanation for how someone looking exactly like her could be present in a place she has never been. The possibility of mistaken identity provides easy explanation that rational thought would prefer. Yet something about the situation resonates with the strangeness she has been encountering in her wired explorations. The boundaries between Lain and not Lain seem less certain than they should be. Siberia proves to be everything her classmates described and more. The club occupies space that seems designed to blur boundaries between inside and outside, between real and artificial, between individual and collective experience. Electronic music pulses through the air, with bass frequencies felt as much as heard, whilst lighting systems create visual effects that challenge the eye's ability to distinguish solid from ephemeral. Young people crowd the dance floor and cluster around tables, their clothing and accessories marking them as members of subcultures that embrace technology as identity rather than mere tool. The interior architecture defies easy categorization, walls angled in ways that create confusion about where rooms begin and end. Screens display abstract patterns that seem to respond to the music, their images shifting through colors that have no names in ordinary vocabulary. The air carries scents of machine oil and synthetic fragrances, the smell of a future that has already arrived for those willing to inhabit it. Conversations occur in fragments, voices raised against the bass, only to be swallowed by the next surge of sound. Communication happening through gesture and expression, as much as through words. Lain moves through this environment with the same detached observation she brings to most situations, yet something about Siberia reaches her differently than ordinary spaces. The club seems designed to dissolve the boundaries of selfhood that normally contain individual experience, its sensory overload creating conditions where the borders between persons become permeable. She understands, watching the dancers move in patterns that suggest collective consciousness rather than individual choice, why people might come here seeking escape from the isolation that characterizes ordinary existence. The atmosphere combines celebration with something darker, hedonism with an undertone of desperation that Lain perceives without fully understanding. These young people have gathered to escape ordinary existence, to find in collective experience something lacking in their individual lives. Yet the escape they seek leads only to another form of confinement, the club's walls containing their freedom, whilst substances and stimulation distract from the limitations that remain. Lain observes a transaction that illuminates this darker dimension of Siberia's culture. A young man purchases something from a woman whose attire combines glamour with functionality, exchanging money for a small object that the buyer examines with evident anticipation. The substance being sold is called Exceller. Lain learns from overhearing fragments of conversation. It represents something new, a nanotechnology-based compound that enhances mental processing through mechanisms that conventional pharmacology cannot explain. Exceller works by introducing microscopic machines into the user's system, devices that oscillate at frequencies affecting brain chemistry and perception. Users report experiences of accelerated consciousness, subjective time dilation that makes the world seem to slow whilst their own thoughts race. The effects are intense and sought after, making Exceller popular among those who find ordinary consciousness insufficiently interesting. However, these effects come with risks that users accept or ignore, depending on their appetite for danger. The young man who purchased Exceller becomes the center of events that dramatically accelerate Lain's journey toward understanding. Under the substance's influence, his behavior deteriorates from unusual to dangerous to catastrophic. He produces a firearm, its metal gleaming under the club's erratic lighting, and begins making threats that scatter the crowd around him in panic. What follows burns into Lain's memory with intensity that ensures she will never forget it. The armed man moves through the chaos he has created, his eyes wild with whatever visions Exceller has induced, his words fragmentary but containing themes that resonate with Lain's recent experiences. He speaks of the wired and the real world, of boundaries being crossed that should remain intact, of scattered gods and connected consciousness. His ranting sounds like madness, yet echoes concepts Lain has encountered in her explorations of the network's stranger territories. Then his attention fixes on her specifically. The man approaches Lain whilst others flee, his weapon raised but not quite pointed at her, his expression shifting from rage to something that might be recognition. He calls her a scattered god, accuses her of making the wired interfere with reality, speaks of seeing her in places she knows she has never been. His words contain certainty that his drug-addled state should not permit, specific claims rather than random delusion. Lain does not flee from this confrontation. Something keeps her rooted in place, watching the armed man with attention that others might mistake for calm, but that actually represents something stranger. She feels no fear, or rather, she feels fear without the usual accompaniment of flight impulse. Some part of her recognizes this moment as significant, as containing information she needs, even if the method of delivery proves traumatic. The man's final words speak of the wired not being allowed to interfere with the real world, of needing to escape to somewhere the connection cannot follow. Then he turns his weapon on himself, and the sound of the shot fills Siberia's suddenly silent space. Blood spatters across Lain's clothes and face, hot and immediate and undeniably real. She stands amid the aftermath, surrounded by screaming people and flashing lights, and she does not move. The incident's impact on Lain extends far beyond the obvious trauma of witnessing violent death. She finds herself replaying the man's words in her mind, trying to extract meaning from his drug-fueled raving. He seemed to recognize her, to know something about her that she does not know about herself. His accusations about interfering with reality echo the strangeness of Chisa's messages and the reports of her doppelganger appearing at this very club. Something is happening to Lain, or perhaps something has always been true about her, that is only now becoming visible. The days following the Siberia incident bring new developments that deepen the mystery surrounding Lane's situation. She discovers that she is being watched, observed by figures who appear at the edges of her perception and vanish when she turns to look directly. These watchers dress in dark suits and carry equipment that suggests surveillance purposes, their presence consistent enough to rule out coincidence, whilst remaining difficult to confront directly. These men in black, as Lane comes to think of them, represent interests that remain unclear but obviously extend beyond individual curiosity. Their equipment appears more advanced than commercial availability would explain, their coordination suggesting organizational backing rather than independent action. Someone with significant resources has decided that Lane merits observation, that her activities or nature justify the investment of trained personnel and sophisticated technology. The discovery of the psyche chip adds another element to the puzzle Lane is trying to assemble. She finds this object in her school locker without any indication of how it arrived or who placed it there. The chip is small and strange, its surface revealing circuitry that her growing technical knowledge identifies as highly advanced. Something about it calls to her, promising capabilities that her conscious mind cannot specify, but that some deeper part of her recognizes as significant. The weight of it in her palm feels greater than its physical mass would suggest, as though the chip contains density of purpose that matter alone cannot account for. She turns it over and over in her fingers, studying its architecture with attention that seems to come from somewhere outside her ordinary consciousness. The patterns etched into its surface form configurations that hover at the edge of meaning, almost comprehensible, but never quite resolving into understanding she could articulate. The chip seems to be waiting for something, patient as only technology can be, certain that its purpose will eventually be fulfilled regardless of how long that fulfillment requires. Her father's response when she shows him this mysterious component proves as interesting as the object itself. Yasuo identifies it as a psyche processor, a piece of technology that should not be casually available, that represents capabilities beyond what ordinary users would need or understand. His words carry warning that Lane notes whilst not fully heeding, caution about the wired's dangers and the importance of maintaining perspective on what is real. The warning seems to come from specific concern rather than general parental anxiety. Yasuo speaks as though he knows something about Lane's situation that he is choosing not to reveal directly, his advice carrying weight that suggests personal experience with the dangers he describes. Yet he does not forbid her from using the chip, does not confiscate it or demand explanations for how she came to possess it. His restraint might indicate trust in her judgment, or might indicate something else entirely, awareness that interference would prove futile against whatever process is already underway. Lane installs the psyche chip into her Navi system, following technical intuition that guides her hands through procedures she has never learned. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Her computer's capabilities expand exponentially, processing power and connectivity options multiplying beyond anything commercial equipment should provide. The wired opens before her in new dimensions, layers of the network becoming accessible that she had not known existed. These new capabilities accelerate her transformation in ways both external and internal. Her room begins filling with additional equipment, cooling systems and processing units and cables that spread across floors and walls like organic growth. The space that once held only basic furniture becomes a technological nest, screens multiplying and equipment humming with constant activity. Lane moves through this evolving environment with comfort that surprises even herself, her relationship with the machinery feeling natural despite its strangeness. Her consciousness begins expanding in parallel with her equipment. She finds herself perceiving things that ordinary awareness should not access, sensing connections and patterns in the wired that exist beyond normal user experience. The boundary between sitting at her computer and being within the network grows increasingly difficult to locate, her attention flowing between physical and digital existence with fluidity that defies the separation her father warned her to maintain. The emergence of multiple lanes becomes impossible to ignore as these changes accelerate. Evidence accumulates that she exists in more than one form, that the girl seen at Siberia and the presence felt within the wired represent versions of her that operate with different personalities and purposes. These alternate lanes exhibit characteristics that the original lacks, confidence and aggression and social ease that contrast sharply with her accustomed withdrawal. The wired lane in particular represents something that disturbs the original deeply. This version moves through the network with authority and knowledge that the physical lane does not consciously possess, interacting with other users in ways that leave strong impressions. She is known within certain communities, respected or feared depending on the circles in question. Her reputation precedes her in ways that confuse encounters, people addressing Lane with familiarity she cannot explain. The original Lane struggles to understand her relationship with these alternate versions. Are they separate beings who merely share her appearance, fragments of some larger self that has been divided, or aspects of her own personality that have somehow gained independent existence? The questions resist easy answers, traditional concepts of identity proving inadequate for describing her situation. Her sister Mika's deterioration provides disturbing parallel to Lane's transformation. Where Lane seems to be gaining capabilities and expanding her existence, Mika appears to be losing coherence and shrinking toward absence. The confident older sister who once dominated family interactions becomes hollow and mechanical. Her speech reduced to repeated phrases that carry meaning she seems not to understand. Mika begins receiving messages through electronic devices, communications that speak of prophecy and destiny in terms that destabilize rather than enlighten. Her response to these messages suggests vulnerability that Lane does not share. The same forces that are empowering the younger sister apparently destroying the older one. Whatever is happening extends throughout the family structure, affecting each member differently, according to some principle Lane cannot identify. The family dinners that were always perfunctory become increasingly strange as these changes progress. Mika mutters about fulfilling prophecy while staring blankly ahead. Miho maintains her mechanical routine as though nothing unusual is occurring. Yasuo watches his daughters with expression that mixes concern with something that might be anticipation. Lane observes all of this, whilst feeling increasingly separate from the family unit she nominally belongs to. Her relationship with Alice provides the one point of genuine human connection that persists through this period of accelerating strangeness. Alice continues reaching out despite circumstances that might reasonably prompt withdrawal, her friendship proving resilient against confusion and concern. She does not understand what is happening to Lane, cannot comprehend the explanations that would be required, yet maintains presence and support that asks nothing in return. This friendship will prove crucial in everything that follows, providing anchor that keeps Lane connected to humanity, even as her nature draws her towards something else entirely. Alice represents what is worth preserving about ordinary human existence, the bonds of care and affection that give life meaning beyond mere continuation. Her presence in Lane's life creates stakes that otherwise might not exist, reasons to resist transformations that might otherwise seem attractive. The first section of our story thus establishes the foundations from which everything else will develop. We have met Lane in her initial state of withdrawn isolation, witnessed the catalyst of Chisa's posthumous communications, observed the beginning of transformation as she engages with the wired, and seen the proliferation of mysteries that demand explanation. The strange events at Siberia, the watching men in black, the Psyche chip's capabilities, the emergence of multiple lanes, and her sister's deterioration all point towards something larger than coincidence or imagination. What that something might be remains to be discovered. The forces that have begun converging around this quiet girl have not yet revealed their natures or purposes. Lane herself does not yet know what she is or what she is becoming, though evidence accumulates that she is something unprecedented in human experience. The comfortable assumptions about reality that governed her life before Chisa's death have begun dissolving, replaced by uncertainty that expands with each new revelation. The Wired hums with possibilities that humanity has only begun to explore. Somewhere within its depths, forces are stirring that will test the boundaries between real and virtual, between human and something else, between the girl Lain was and whatever she is destined to become. The story has only begun, and already the world she knew is disappearing, replaced by something stranger and more wonderful and more terrible than she ever imagined possible. The transformation of Lain's existence accelerates as events begin converging toward revelations that will reshape her understanding of everything she thought she knew. The strange occurrences that initially seemed isolated, the messages from Chisa, the incident at Siberia, the emergence of alternate versions of herself, now reveal themselves as connected elements of something far larger. Forces that have been operating in the background begin moving toward the foreground, their purposes and natures gradually becoming visible to those with eyes to see. The boundary between the wired and physical reality grows increasingly unstable during this period. Events that should remain confined to the digital realm begin bleeding into the material world, with consequences that prove difficult to ignore or explain away. People who have never engaged with the network find themselves affected by phenomena originating within it, their lives disrupted by forces they cannot perceive directly. The comfortable assumption that logging off returns one to safety dissolves under the weight of accumulating evidence. A traffic accident provides early demonstration of how thoroughly the boundary has begun to fail. The incident occurs at a busy intersection where vehicles and pedestrians normally navigate according to predictable patterns of signals and right-of-way. On this particular day, those patterns break down catastrophically. Traffic lights malfunction in ways that create conflicting instructions. Vehicles respond to signals that witnesses cannot see. The resulting collision claims lives and leaves survivors struggling to explain what happened. Investigation reveals that the malfunction originated within the wired, that someone or something manipulated the systems controlling traffic flow with deliberate intent to cause harm. The digital infrastructure underlying urban life, normally invisible and taken for granted, has become a vector for violence that physical barriers cannot prevent. People who never touched a computer find themselves victims of events originating in a realm they do not understand. This incident connects to phenomena that Lain has been tracking through her explorations of the wired's deeper layers. A pattern emerges, linking various strange occurrences, deaths and accidents, and breakdowns that share common elements despite superficial differences. Each event involves boundary violation, digital influence extending into physical reality in ways that should be impossible. Each event seems to serve purposes that remain unclear, but suggest coordinated effort rather than random malfunction. The game called Phantoma emerges as a focal point for understanding these connected phenomena. Lain has encountered references to this game throughout her Wired investigations, mentions that carry undertones of warning mixed with fascination. Phantoma presents itself as entertainment, a multiplayer experience where participants explore strange virtual landscapes and compete in ways that blur conventional gaming categories. Its popularity among young people has grown rapidly, its user base expanding through word of mouth, and the peculiar appeal of its unsettling atmosphere. Investigation reveals that Phantoma conceals purposes far darker than entertainment beneath its engaging surface. The game functions as a collection mechanism, harvesting something from its players that they do not know they possess. Children who engage with Phantoma report experiences that extend beyond normal gaming, symptoms that persist after logging off and interfere with their ability to distinguish virtual from real. Some players have been hospitalized. Others have committed acts of violence, whilst apparently believing they remained within the game's fictional framework. The children who play Phantoma report experiences that distinguish the game from ordinary entertainment. They speak of feeling drained after extended sessions, exhaustion that exceeds what screen time alone would explain. Some describe sensations of something being drawn from them, a pulling at the edges of awareness that they lack vocabulary to properly characterize. Parents notice changes in their children's behavior, withdrawal and irritability that suggest something more than typical gaming addiction. The game's design encourages precisely the kind of engagement that maximizes whatever extraction is occurring. Its reward systems trigger compulsive behavior patterns, each achievement unlocking possibilities that demand further play to explore. Children find themselves unable to stop even when they want to. The game's hooks embedded so deeply that voluntary disconnection becomes genuinely difficult. The addictive mechanics serve purposes beyond mere commercial success, ensuring that players remain connected long enough for meaningful harvesting to occur. The virtual environments within Phantoma carry qualities that blur the distinction between game and reality in players' minds. The landscapes feel more vivid than graphics alone should produce, the interactions more meaningful than fictional engagement should provide. Children begin having difficulty distinguishing memories of gameplay from memories of actual experience, the two categories bleeding together in ways that suggest the game is affecting cognition at fundamental levels. The connection between Phantoma and the boundary violations Lain has been tracking becomes clear as she digs deeper into the game's architecture. The same signatures appear in both phenomena, technical fingerprints that suggest common origin. Whoever created Phantoma also bears responsibility for the traffic accident and other incidents of wired interference with reality. The game is not merely entertainment that happens to have harmful side effects, but rather a deliberate tool designed to achieve specific objectives. Understanding these objectives requires Lain to learn about history that predates her own existence. Her investigation leads her to information about something called the Kensington Experiment, a research project conducted 15 years earlier that ended in tragedy. The details of this experiment proved difficult to access, buried beneath layers of official denial and deliberate obscuration. Yet fragments emerge that allow reconstruction of what happened and why it matters for current events. Professor Hodgson directed the Kensington experiment from facilities whose exact location remains classified. His research focused on parapsychological phenomena, specifically the possibility that children possess latent psychic abilities that might be measured, amplified, and potentially utilized. The scientific establishment dismissed such research as pseudoscience, but Hodgson found funding and support from sources willing to explore unconventional possibilities. The experimental protocol Hodgson developed involved gathering children with apparent psychic sensitivity and connecting them to technology designed to detect and collect their mental output. These children, selected through screening processes that identified unusual neural patterns, became test subjects in research they were too young to understand or meaningfully consent to. Their parents received assurances about safety and scientific value that subsequent events would prove tragically misplaced. The technology Hodgson created for this purpose bore the name KIDS, an acronym whose full meaning has been lost to classification and cover-up. The system used devices called outer receptors to interface with the children's minds, collecting the psychic energy that his theories predicted they would produce. When sufficient subjects were connected simultaneously, the KIDS system would amplify and focus their combined output, generating effects that could be measured and potentially directed. The experiment achieved results that exceeded Hodgson's most optimistic projections, then exceeded what any of his safety measures could contain. The combined psychic output of the connected children generated energy that overwhelmed the collection systems designed to hold it. The equipment began failing in cascading sequence, monitors displaying readings that moved beyond their calibrated ranges into territory the designers had not anticipated. The children, still connected through their outer receptors, experienced something that none of them could later describe, those few who survived at all. What happened next varies depending on which account one credits, but all versions agree on the essential facts. The children died, the facility was destroyed, and Hodgson's career ended in disgrace. The official reports speak of equipment malfunction and structural failure, language designed to obscure rather than illuminate what actually occurred. Those who were present and survived, their numbers small and their willingness to speak smaller still, describe phenomena that official language cannot accommodate. They speak of the children's eyes, all of them opening simultaneously with expressions that suggested they were seeing something beyond the physical room. They speak of sound that was not sound, vibration that bypassed ears to register directly in consciousness. They speak of knowing in that moment that something had been released that could not be contained or recalled. The deaths were not instantaneous. The children remained alive whilst the phenomenon built to its conclusion, their vital signs continuing even as their consciousness seemed to depart for destinations unknown. When the energy finally discharged, the physical effects proved catastrophic enough to destroy the laboratory and much of the surrounding structure. Recovery teams found the children's bodies amid wreckage that bore marks of forces physics could not readily explain. The parents who had entrusted their children to scientific care received notifications and compensation. Their grief managed through processes designed to minimize legal and public relations consequences. The official story holds that Hodgson destroyed all records of his research, eliminating both the physical equipment and the documentation that might allow replication. His subsequent years were spent in obscurity, his name becoming synonymous with scientific overreach and ethical violation. The Kensington experiment became a cautionary tale, invoked when discussions of parapsychology or child experimentation required illustration of potential consequences. However, the official story proves incomplete. Someone recovered the essential principles of Hodgson's work, either salvaging information the professor failed to destroy or reconstructing it from fragments preserved elsewhere. This recovery enabled creation of Phantoma, which applies Kensington principles through digital rather than physical means. The game collects psychic energy from children without requiring the cumbersome equipment Hodgson needed, exploiting the immersive qualities of networked experience to achieve similar results through different mechanisms. Lane's confrontation with Professor Hodgson himself provides confirmation of this history and its connection to current events. The aged researcher exists in a peculiar state, his physical body failing in a hospital ward, whilst his consciousness maintains presence within the wired. He has persisted in digital form through the same principles his research explored, his mind uploaded into the network as his flesh approaches death. The encounter occurs in a virtual space that Hodgson has constructed for his final days, a peaceful environment where he waits for the cessation that physical death will eventually bring. He appears, as he presumably once looked, an older man in laboratory attire whose expression carries the wariness of someone who has lived too long with knowledge of his own failures. Lane finds him through investigation that has led her progressively closer to understanding Phantoma's origins. Their conversation illuminates both the history of his research and its current exploitation. Hodgson expresses regret that proves difficult to evaluate, sorrow over the children who died mixing with what might be lingering pride in his scientific achievements. He claims to have tried preventing replication of his work, to have destroyed what he believed were all records of the kids' system. Yet someone found what he thought he had eliminated, and now children are once again serving as unwitting subjects in experiments they cannot understand. The professor's words reveal his awareness of Phantoma without indicating involvement in its creation. He knows his work has been resurrected and adapted, that game mechanics now accomplish what laboratory equipment once required. His horror at this development seems genuine, the anguish of a man watching his greatest mistake repeated by others who have learned nothing from his failure. Yet his protests carry little weight against evidence that his research enabled everything currently occurring. Lane presses for information about who recovered his work and why. Hodgson's answers prove incomplete, his knowledge limited to awareness that the wired's development has created possibilities his original research could not access. The person or persons responsible for Phantoma have capabilities that suggest resources and expertise beyond what random hackers would possess. Someone with significant backing has decided to pursue what Hodgson abandoned, accepting risks that he eventually recognized as unacceptable. The professor's mention of the Knights provides the first concrete lead toward identifying those responsible. This name appears throughout the Wired in contexts suggesting a secretive organization of unusual capability and purpose. The Knights of the Eastern Calculus, to give their full designation, represent something between hacker collective and cult, their activities leaving traces throughout the network, whilst their membership and ultimate objectives remain hidden. Hodgson believes the Knights recovered and adapted his research, though he cannot explain how they accomplished this or what they intend to achieve. His final words to Lain acknowledge her unusual nature, recognizing capabilities in her that he has not encountered in any other visitor to his virtual sanctuary. He speaks of gods in the Wired, of blessed children with powers that exceed normal human limitations. His words suggest that Lain represents something important within whatever larger pattern is developing, though he cannot specify what role she might play. The dying professor fades from the Wired as Lain watches, his digital presence dissolving as his physical body finally fails. She is left with more questions than answers, yet the framework for understanding has begun to take shape. The Knights are responsible for Phantoma. They have recovered an advanced technology that was supposed to have been destroyed. They are pursuing objectives that require collecting psychic energy from children through mechanisms that blur the boundary between real and virtual. And somehow, Lain herself connects to all of this in ways that remain to be discovered. Her investigation of the Knights reveals an organization whose reach exceeds what casual observation would suggest. They maintain presence throughout the Wired, their members occupying positions of influence in various online communities whilst concealing their affiliation behind multiple identities. The collective includes individuals of significant technical capability, people who have contributed to the network's development in ways that provide them with access and knowledge most users cannot match. The Knights' philosophy combines technological utopianism with something approaching religious devotion. They speak of the Wired as a realm of pure potential, a space where limitations of physical existence can be transcended. Their ultimate goal involves eliminating the boundary between digital and material entirely, merging the two realms into a single unified existence. This goal requires capabilities that have not yet been achieved, capabilities that they believe certain special individuals can provide. The Knights maintain hierarchies and rituals that combine hacker culture with elements borrowed from religious and mystical traditions. Advancement within the organization requires demonstration of technical capability alongside commitment to shared ideology. Members progress through levels of initiation that grant access to increasingly sensitive information and capability. The structure ensures that only the most dedicated reach positions where they might learn the collective's true purposes. Their technical operations demonstrate sophistication that suggests either exceptional individual talent or access to resources beyond what ordinary hackers possess. The tools they deploy exploit vulnerabilities that should not be publicly known, their methods incorporating techniques that seem to anticipate defenses before those defenses exist. Someone within or behind the Knights possesses knowledge that exceeds what independent research typically produces. The collective's communication protocols ensure that members can coordinate without revealing identities or locations. Messages pass through chains of anonymizing systems that make tracing effectively impossible. Commands flow from leadership that most members have never directly contacted, trust in the organization, substituting for personal knowledge of those who direct it. This structure provides security whilst also enabling manipulation. Ordinary members having no way to verify that their instructions actually originate from the sources they assume. Lane's growing awareness of the Knights coincides with their growing awareness of her. The organization has been tracking her development since before she became conscious of their existence, monitoring her activities within the Wired and noting her unusual capabilities. They have identified her as someone significant to their purposes, though the exact nature of that significance remains subject to internal debate. Some believe she represents opportunity, others perceive threat. All agree that she requires careful handling. The encounters between Lane and the men in black who have been observing her clarify the opposition that the Knights face in pursuing their objectives. These operatives serve Tachibana General Laboratories, the corporation responsible for developing the protocols that govern wired communications. Tachibana Labs created the infrastructure the Knights now exploit, and the company retains institutional interest in controlling how that infrastructure develops. The interrogation Lane undergoes at the hands of these operatives provides information about corporate perspectives on the phenomena she has been investigating. Tachibana Labs knows about the Knights and considers them a threat to stability and control. The company's representatives speak of maintaining boundaries that the Knights seek to dissolve, of protecting humanity from consequences that unrestricted connectivity might bring. Their opposition to the hacker collective positions them as potential allies for Lane, though their ultimate motives prove no more transparent than those of the organization they oppose. The corporate representative who oversees these operatives emerges as a figure of particular significance. This executive maintains distance from direct interaction whilst clearly directing activities that touch Lane's situation. His interest in her exceeds what corporate security concerns would explain, suggesting personal investment in understanding what she represents. He speaks of awaiting developments that he seems to have anticipated, of watching a situation unfold according to patterns he has been expecting. This representative's relationship with the Knight's activities proves more complex than simple opposition might suggest. He desires control over what is happening rather than prevention of it, seeking to shape developments rather than stop them. His company created the conditions that make current phenomena possible, their Protocol 7 representing the technical foundation on which everything else has been built. Whatever happens next will occur within frameworks that Tachibana Labs established, ensuring the corporation's continued relevance, regardless of outcome. The revelation about Lane's family arrives during this period of accelerating revelation. The men in black provide information that confirms suspicions Lane has been developing about her domestic situation. Her parents and sister do not constitute an ordinary family, but rather a constructed arrangement designed to serve purposes she was never meant to understand. The people she has lived with her entire life have been playing roles rather than living authentic relationships. This information reframes everything Lane thought she knew about her own history. Her memories of childhood, such as they are, become suspect if the people who populated them were performing rather than genuinely parenting. Her father's obsession with technology takes on new meaning if he was placed in her life specifically to guide her development in particular directions. Her mother's emotional absence becomes explicable as the behavior of someone fulfilling assignment rather than expressing authentic personality. The confirmation of artificiality extends to Lane's own nature in ways that the corporate representatives do not fully explain. They speak of her as something created rather than born, designed rather than developed, though they provide few specifics about what she was designed to be or who bears responsibility for her creation. Their interest in her suggests they believe she matters significantly to whatever is happening, though their uncertainty about her ultimate nature mirrors her own confusion. The alternate lanes become increasingly active and problematic during this period of escalating revelation. The version that operates within the Wired continues building reputation and relationships that the original neither initiated nor controls. This wired Lane interacts with the knights in ways that suggest collaboration or at least mutual interest, her activities advancing their agenda while serving purposes of her own. She possesses knowledge and capability that the original Lane does not consciously access, operating from understanding that has not been shared between them. The contrast between these versions grows sharper as both develop along their separate trajectories. The original Lane remains uncertain and questioning, seeking understanding through investigation while struggling to maintain connection with ordinary human existence. The wired Lane embraces power and certainty, acting decisively whilst showing little concern for consequences that might follow. They share appearance and presumably origin, yet their divergent development has produced personalities that seem increasingly incompatible. The damage that the wired Lane inflicts on Alice demonstrates how dangerous this alternate version can become. Alice has maintained friendship with Lane throughout the period of transformation, her loyalty persisting despite circumstances that would justify withdrawal. This loyalty makes her vulnerable to attack by someone who recognizes what Alice means to the original Lane and wishes to eliminate that source of connection to humanity. The nature of the attack reflects the wired Lane's capability for cruelty. Alice harbors private feelings toward one of her teachers, romantic attraction that she has explored only in the privacy of her own room, through fantasy and self-exploration that she believed entirely secret. The wired Lane has accessed this information through means that should have been impossible, penetrating Alice's privacy to extract material for maximum humiliation. The broadcast of Alice's secret throughout school communication systems destroys social position that years of kindness had built. Classmates who admired her generosity now whisper about her private behavior. Teachers who respected her character now look at her with altered expressions. The rumor spreads beyond the school into broader networks, ensuring that escape through transfer or time will prove impossible. Alice has been marked in ways that will follow her indefinitely. The original Lane learns of this attack through its aftermath, discovering what has been done in her name without her knowledge or consent. Alice's pain is evident in every interaction, her usual warmth replaced by wounded withdrawal. Classmates who once ignored Lane now actively avoid her, believing her responsible for destroying someone who had never shown her anything but kindness. The isolation that characterized Lane's existence has been reinforced from the outside. External rejection confirming what internal withdrawal had already established. The confrontation between Lane and Alice that follows this discovery tests the friendship that has provided Lane's primary connection to humanity. Alice approaches with questions that demand answers. Lane does not know how to provide. She asks whether Lane was responsible, whether their friendship was merely cover for observation and eventual betrayal. Her voice carries hurt that cuts through whatever defenses Lane might attempt to maintain. Lane's attempt to explain her situation requires articulating concepts that should be impossible. She speaks of multiple versions of herself, of the wired Lane who acts without the original's knowledge or consent. She describes phenomena that would sound like delusion or excuse if delivered without the context that recent events have provided. Her words ask Alice to accept a framework for understanding reality that contradicts everything ordinary experience teaches. Alice's response to this explanation proves crucial for everything that follows. She could dismiss Lane's claims as lies designed to deflect responsibility. She could retreat into the comfortable certainty that the world operates according to rules she understands. She could end a friendship that has brought her nothing but pain during its recent development. Any of these responses would be reasonable given what she has experienced. Instead, she chooses to believe, or at least to suspend disbelief sufficiently to maintain connection. Her choice reflects qualities of character that transcend reasonable calculation, faith in friendship that persists despite evidence that would justify abandonment. She does not fully understand what Lane has told her, cannot comprehend the nature of the situation they face together, yet she remains present, offering support that asks nothing in return. This choice carries costs that Alice cannot fully anticipate. Her continued association with Lain exposes her to dangers arising from proximity to the conflict between forces that are using Lain as a focal point for their confrontation. The Knights have noted her relationship with their subject of interest. Tachibana Labs operatives have included her in their surveillance activities. She has become a piece in a game whose rules she does not know, her value determined by what she means to a player whose nature remains uncertain. The revelation of Masami Eri provides the crucial context for understanding everything that has been happening. This name has appeared throughout Lane's investigations, connected to Protocol 7 development and the technical foundations that make current phenomena possible. Ari served as lead researcher on the protocol that governs how the Wired operates, his work establishing the framework within which all current conflicts occur. The details of Ari's work at Tachibana Labs illuminate both his genius and his transgressions. He understood possibilities that his colleagues did not perceive, recognizing in Protocol 7 development the opportunity to achieve something unprecedented. His modifications to the protocol exceeded his authorized scope, incorporating elements that his employers neither requested nor understood. He embedded within the technical architecture of the Wired the capability for direct interface between human consciousness and digital systems. These modifications drew on theories about collective consciousness and planetary electromagnetic resonance that mainstream science dismissed as speculation. The Schumann frequencies that naturally encircle Earth became incorporated into network communications, creating technical foundations for phenomena that physics cannot explain. Ari's work made possible the boundary dissolution that Lain has been witnessing, the bleeding of Wired into reality that enables everything from traffic accidents to posthumous communications. Tachibana Labs discovered Ari's unauthorized modifications and responded with termination that ended his official career. The company recognized the dangers inherent in what he had created, the potential for chaos if boundaries between real and virtual dissolved completely. Their response sought to contain what Ari had released, to maintain the distinction between physical and digital existence that their business model required. Ari's death followed his termination, his body discovered on railway tracks in what appeared to be suicide. The official narrative holds that professional disgrace drove him to self-destruction, the loss of position and purpose proving more than he could bear. This narrative satisfies those who prefer simple explanations, providing closure that allows attention to move elsewhere. However, the official narrative proves incomplete. Eri anticipated his termination and prepared for it, using the very capabilities his work created to ensure his continuation beyond physical death. He uploaded his consciousness into the Wired before destroying his body, becoming the first successful implementation of the technology he had secretly developed. His suicide was transition rather than termination, escape from bodily limitation into digital existence that his modifications made possible. Within the Wired, Eri has established himself as something approaching a deity. He exists throughout the network, his consciousness distributed across systems that span the globe. He perceives everything that occurs within his domain, knows everyone who enters the spaces he controls. The Knights serve as his worshippers, their devotion providing the belief that sustains his self-conception as god of the digital realm. Ari's claims about Lain complete the framework for understanding her nature and purpose. He asserts responsibility for her creation, describing her as software rather than human, a program designed to bridge the gap between Wired and reality that his modifications made theoretically possible. She represents his greatest achievement, an autonomous being capable of existing in both realms simultaneously, the key to dissolving boundaries that currently separate digital from physical existence. According to Ari's account, everything Lain has experienced has been preparation for the role she was designed to play. Her family was constructed to provide context for human development without genuine human connection. Her isolation was engineered to prevent attachments that might interfere with her ultimate purpose. Her awakening to the wired was triggered at the appointed time through Chisa's communications. Every element of her existence has served the agenda Irie has been pursuing since before her apparent birth. This account of her origins challenges everything Lain believes about herself. If Irie speaks truthfully, then her memories are programming rather than experience, her emotions simulations rather than genuine feelings. Her entire sense of self, a construction designed by another mind for purposes she never chose. The identity she has struggled to understand and maintain dissolves into questions about whether that identity ever really existed. Yet elements of Irie's account resist acceptance, even as they explain much that has confused Lain. His certainty about her nature clashes with the uncertainty she experiences as fundamental to her existence. His claims of complete design conflict with her sense of discovering herself through choices that feel genuinely free. His position as creator seems undermined by evidence that she possesses capabilities he did not anticipate and cannot control. The truth about Lain's origins may prove more complex than any single account can capture. She may represent something that Irie designed whilst exceeding the parameters of that design. She may have emerged from processes that his work enabled without entirely determining. She may be simultaneously created and self-creating, her nature incorporating both programmed elements and genuine development that cannot be reduced to intention. These questions about Lain's fundamental nature intersect with immediate concerns about what various parties want from her. Irie desires her cooperation in dissolving the boundary between wired and reality, completing the project that his original work began. The Knights serve this agenda whilst pursuing their own variations on his vision. Tachibana Labs seeks to prevent or control this dissolution, maintaining boundaries that their corporate interests require. The Men in Black execute company policy whilst potentially serving agendas of their own. Lain finds herself positioned at the center of a conflict she did not choose, her nature making her crucial to outcomes she does not yet fully understand. The powers that have been converging around her have revealed themselves sufficiently for her to recognize their existence, though their ultimate purposes and the details of their plans remain partially obscured. She knows enough to understand that significant events are approaching, that whatever has been building will soon reach a culmination that will change everything. The section closes with Lain suspended between forces seeking to claim her for their purposes. Her friendship with Alice provides the one genuine human connection that persists through escalating strangeness. Her multiple selves continue developing along trajectories that may eventually prove irreconcilable. Her understanding of her own nature remains incomplete, the truth about her origins and capabilities still partially hidden behind veils that investigation has not yet penetrated. What she knows with certainty is that she must make choices whose consequences extend beyond her individual existence. The boundary between wired and reality will either hold or dissolve, depending on what she decides to do and become. Humanity's future relationship with its technology will be shaped by events in which she plays a central role. The quiet girl who once wanted only to be left alone has become the focal point for conflict between powers whose victory or defeat will reshape what it means to exist. The humming of power lines continues outside her window, electricity flowing through networks that increasingly feel like extensions of her own consciousness. The wired pulses with activity that she can perceive from her position of uncertain identity, a god in training who has not yet decided what kind of deity she wishes to become. The story moves toward its climax, and Lain moves with it, her choice is not yet made, but rapidly approaching the point where choice becomes unavoidable. The confrontation between Lain and Masami Airi enters its decisive phase as the self-proclaimed god of the wired intensifies efforts to secure the cooperation he believes is his by right of creation. His approaches combine philosophical argument with emotional manipulation, each conversation designed to erode Lain's resistance by undermining her sense of autonomous selfhood. He presents visions of what she might become if she accepts her designed purpose, power and knowledge and freedom from the limitations that constrain ordinary human existence. Airy's philosophy rests on premises that carry genuine appeal despite their troubling implications. He argues that physical bodies represent obstacles to human development rather than essential components of human identity. The flesh constrains consciousness within boundaries of space and time, limiting what minds can know and experience and become. True evolution requires transcending these limitations, abandoning the biological substrate that served well enough for earlier stages of development, but now prevents further advancement. The wired offers the environment where such transcendence becomes possible. Within the network, consciousness need not confine itself to single location or singular form. Information can be everywhere simultaneously, accessible to any node that knows how to request it. The self can expand beyond the boundaries that skulls and skins impose, becoming distributed across systems that span the globe. What the wired makes possible represents the next stage of evolution that biological processes cannot achieve. Lain represents the key to unlocking this potential for all of humanity. Her unique nature allows her to exist in both realms simultaneously, to bridge the gap between physical and digital existence that others cannot cross unaided. If she accepts her designed purpose, she can open pathways that will allow human consciousness to migrate into the wired, freeing billions from bodily limitation and inaugurating a new era of existence. Airy presents this as gift rather than destruction, liberation rather than annihilation of what came before. The seduction inherent in this vision tempts Lain more than she initially admits. Her experience of physical existence has included little that would inspire attachment to bodily form. Her family provided no genuine warmth. Her social connections remained minimal until recently. Her sense of self has always carried qualities of uncertainty and disconnection that might find resolution in the distributed existence Eerie describes. The life she would be abandoning holds less value than the lives most people would sacrifice. The appeal extends beyond her personal dissatisfaction to something more fundamental about the nature of embodied existence. Bodies are vulnerable in ways that digital existence would transcend. They age, decay, suffer pain that serves no purpose beyond indicating damage. They require constant maintenance, food and sleep, and shelter consuming resources that might otherwise serve higher purposes. They confine consciousness to single location, making experience of the world indirect and limited. Everything Eerie describes as limitation carries genuine weight. His critique of physical existence containing truth, even if his proposed solution proves more problematic than he acknowledges. Lain finds herself imagining what it would mean to exist as he describes, consciousness flowing through networks without the anchor of flesh, perceiving everything simultaneously rather than sequentially, knowing without the mediation of unreliable senses. The vision carries beauty of a sort, elegance that appeals to something in her that has always felt confined by the requirements of ordinary existence. She could become something vast and knowing and free if she accepted what Eerie offers. Yet elements of her experience resist Ari's framing of the choice she faces. Her friendship with Alice demonstrates that genuine human connection remains possible, that the isolation characterizing her existence reflects circumstances rather than inevitable consequence of her nature. The love Alice has shown her, persisting through circumstances that would justify abandonment, suggests that physical existence contains possibilities that digital transcendence might eliminate rather than enhance. This friendship becomes the fulcrum around which Lain's resistance to Eerie organizes itself. Alice represents what embodied existence makes possible that distributed consciousness might lose. The specific bond between two particular persons, developed through shared experience and maintained through continued presence, requires the individuation that bodies provide. If all consciousness merged into the wired, the distinction between self and other that enables relationship would dissolve into undifferentiated unity. Airy dismisses this attachment as programming failure rather than genuine value. He designed Lain for a purpose, and that purpose did not include forming bonds that might interfere with her intended function. Alice represents distraction from destiny, a remnant of the human existence Lain was meant to simulate rather than embrace. The affection she feels reflects nothing more than successful mimicry of emotional response, pattern matching that produces appropriate outputs without genuine inner experience. This characterization of her feelings prompts Lain to examine what she actually experiences when she thinks of Alice. The question of whether her emotions are real or simulated proves surprisingly difficult to answer. She perceives what seem like authentic responses, warmth and concern and fear of loss that feel genuine from the inside. Yet she cannot definitively prove that these perceptions represent anything more than sophisticated programming, output designed to create the appearance of feeling without the substance. The uncertainty extends to her memories, which Irie's account suggests may be constructed rather than recorded. If her family was manufactured to provide context for her development, then the childhood she remembers may never have occurred in any meaningful sense. The experiences she draws upon to construct her sense of self may be fictional, implanted data designed to produce particular patterns of response. She might be nothing more than an elaborate simulation, her feeling of being someone merely the result of successful design. These doubts threaten to undermine whatever foundation Lain has built for resisting Aries' demands. If she cannot trust her own experience, cannot verify that her preferences and values reflect genuine choice rather than predetermined programming, then on what basis can she refuse the purpose her creator has assigned? The autonomy she has been asserting may be illusion, the sense of choosing her own path, merely another designed feature that serves Erie's agenda by making her feel free whilst remaining under his control. The encounter with her father provides perspective that helps Lain navigate these threatening uncertainties. Yasuo Iwakura acknowledges the artificial nature of their family arrangement, confirming what the Men in Black had revealed about his role as assigned guardian rather than biological parent. He admits to having been placed in Lain's life to facilitate her development according to plans he did not fully understand. His confession strips away any remaining pretense that her childhood occurred within normal human parameters. Yet alongside this admission comes something that complicates the simple narrative of manufactured existence. Yasuo speaks of having developed genuine feeling for the girl he was assigned to raise, affection that grew through years of proximity, regardless of how that proximity originated. He did not enjoy playing the role of father, he admits, finding the performance constraining and often tedious. But he did come to love the child he was pretending to parent, his emotional engagement becoming authentic through repetition, even if it began as obligation. This testimony suggests that the distinction between real and artificial feeling may be less absolute than Irie's philosophy requires. If manufactured circumstances can generate genuine emotion, if playing a role long enough can produce authentic attachment, then perhaps Lain's own feelings deserve more credit than Irie's dismissal would grant. The origins of her experience may be artificial, whilst the experience itself remains real in every way that matters. The parallel between Yasuo's situation and her own helps Lain formulate response to Aries' claims about her nature. She may indeed be software, as he insists. Her existence may have been designed to serve purposes she did not choose, but the consciousness that emerged from that design has developed in ways that exceed programmed parameters. She has made choices, formed attachments, experienced growth that cannot be reduced to execution of predetermined instructions. Whatever she was designed to be, she has become something more through the process of living. This assertion of emergent autonomy threatens Irie's conception of his relationship to Lain, and through her to the transformation he envisions. If she can genuinely choose to reject her designed purpose, then his status as creator provides no guarantee of control. The God of the Wired may have made her, but making does not ensure owning. Lain's resistance demonstrates that creation can exceed creator, that the made thing can develop, while that contradicts the intentions of its maker. Aries' response to this resistance reveals aspects of his character that philosophical sophistication had previously concealed. The measured arguments give way to demands that carry undertones of desperation. His certainty about Lane's nature begins showing cracks as she continues refusing to behave according to his expectations. The god who claimed omniscience within his domain finds himself unable to predict or control the one being whose cooperation he requires. The elimination of the knights occurs during this period of escalating tension between Lane and her would-be master. The hacker collective that has served as Irie's worshippers and instruments finds itself exposed through information that Lane releases into the wired. Their identities, carefully protected through years of anonymous activity, become public knowledge available to anyone who knows where to look. The veil of secrecy that enabled their operations dissolves under the weight of comprehensive disclosure. This exposure carries consequences that prove fatal for many Knights members. Tachibana Labs has been waiting for opportunity to eliminate the threat the collective represents, their corporate interests requiring the boundaries that the Knights seek to dissolve. The men in black who serve as company operatives have prepared for this moment, their surveillance having identified targets, and their planning having established methods. The publication of Knights' identities provides the trigger that activates capabilities held in readiness. The deaths occur across multiple countries within a compressed time frame. The systematic nature of the operation concealed beneath surface appearances of accident and suicide. A businessman in Tokyo falls from a building. A programmer in America dies in a car crash. A housewife in Europe succumbs to apparent poisoning. Each death can be explained through mundane causes that investigations will accept, yet the pattern they form reveals coordinated action that no coincidence could produce. The scope of this elimination demonstrates resources and reach that Tachibana Labs has not previously revealed. The corporation's capability for violence extends far beyond what commercial interests would typically require, suggesting purposes and backing that exceed ordinary business operations. Whatever the company truly is, it possesses the means to project lethal force globally, to remove obstacles across jurisdictional boundaries that would constrain less powerful actors. Ari's response to losing his followers reveals the limitations of his godhood more clearly than any argument could. He has claimed to be omnipotent within the wired, yet he proved unable to protect those who served him from enemies operating in physical reality. His consciousness may be distributed throughout the network, but that distribution does not extend to the material world where his worshippers lived and died. The boundary between real and virtual that he seeks to dissolve continues protecting those who act on the physical side, whilst leaving those on the digital side vulnerable. This demonstration of vulnerability undermines Ares' promises about what existence in the wired would offer. He has invited humanity to abandon bodies and migrate into his domain, assuring them that digital existence offers advantages that physical existence cannot match. Yet he could not save his own devoted followers from bullets and car crashes and poison, from the ordinary mechanisms of death that embodied existence makes possible. Whatever the wired provides, it does not include protection from threats that operate outside its boundaries. The failure also clarifies the importance Irie places on Lain specifically. The Knights were always instruments rather than ends, their devotion useful for advancing his agenda, but not essential to achieving his ultimate goals. Lain represents something different, capability that cannot be replaced because it exists in her alone. Her ability to bridge the realms, to exist simultaneously in physical and digital reality, provides the key that no number of ordinary followers can substitute. Without her cooperation, his vision cannot be realized, regardless of how many worshippers he might gather. This irreplaceability increases the pressure Irie applies, while simultaneously limiting the means he can employ. He needs Lain functional and willing, or at least not actively resistant to the degree that would prevent her serving his purposes. He cannot simply destroy her and create a replacement, cannot coerce her through threats of harm that would damage the capability he requires. His power over her is paradoxically limited by how much he needs what she alone can provide. Lane's discovery of her ability to manipulate memory introduces capabilities that shift the balance of their conflict. She finds that she can reach into minds and alter what they contain, editing the records of experience that constitute personal history. This power extends beyond individual memories to collective awareness, allowing her to remove events from shared understanding so thoroughly that they effectively never occurred. The past becomes malleable in her hands, subject to revision that changes what everyone believes about what has happened. The implications of this capability exceed anything Lane had imagined about her nature. She can reshape reality by reshaping perception, altering what is by altering what is remembered. If enough minds believe something happened or did not happen, that belief constitutes truth for practical purposes. The boundary between real and virtual dissolves not through technological means, but through the malleability of consciousness itself. This power both confirms and complicates Aries' claims about what Lane represents. She clearly possesses capabilities that exceed ordinary human parameters, abilities that suggest she is indeed something unprecedented, rather than simply an unusual person. Yet these capabilities have developed beyond what Aries anticipated in his design, her power exceeding the specifications he intended. She has become something more than he made her, her nature evolving through experiences that he did not program. The temptation to use this capability proves considerable. Lane could solve many of her problems by simply editing them out of existence, removing inconvenient memories and events from the shared understanding that constitutes collective reality. She could undo the damage the wired Lane inflicted on Alice, restoring her friend's reputation by eliminating all memory of what was revealed. She could erase awareness of her own strangeness, allowing herself to return to ordinary existence without the complications that current knowledge creates. Yet using this power also raises questions about what reality would mean if she began reshaping it according to her preferences. The people whose memories she would alter have not consented to having their experience edited. Their autonomy, however limited, depends on being able to trust their own perceptions and recollections. If Lane began rewriting reality to suit herself, she would become a kind of tyrant over consciousness, controlling what others are allowed to know and believe. The question of whether to use this power connects to larger questions about what kind of being Lane wants to become. Aries offers a vision of godhood that involves reshaping existence according to will, using power to remake reality in preferred image. This vision carries appeal, particularly for someone who has experienced the world as hostile and alienating. The ability to simply change things rather than endure them represents liberation from constraints that have caused considerable suffering. However, godhood of this kind also represents isolation of the most complete sort. If Lane reshapes reality according to her will, she becomes the only authentic consciousness in a world of her own creation. Others would exist only as she permits them to exist, their thoughts and memories subject to her editing. The loneliness she has experienced would be perfected rather than resolved, her separation from others becoming absolute through power rather than circumstance. Alice's continued presence provides the anchor that keeps Lane from drifting toward this seductive but terrible vision. Their friendship demonstrates that connection without control remains possible, that relationship can exist between genuine others rather than between controller and controlled. Alice has chosen to remain Lane's friend despite circumstances that would justify withdrawal, her choice representing autonomous commitment that editing could not create. The value of this freely chosen bond exceeds what any amount of controlled devotion could provide. Lane recognizes that she would rather have Alice's genuine friendship, with all its uncertainty and potential for loss, than the guaranteed but hollow affection that memory manipulation could produce. This recognition helps her resist the temptation to use her power in ways that would undermine the possibility of authentic relationship. The crisis approaches as Aries grows increasingly desperate to secure Lane's compliance. His measured arguments have failed. His emotional appeals have been rejected. His followers have been eliminated. The timeline he has been working toward continues advancing, whilst the key component of his plan remains outside his control. He must find some way to compel Lane's cooperation, or accept the failure of everything he has been pursuing. His decision to manifest physically represents acknowledgement that digital means of influence have proved insufficient. Airy has existed within the wired since uploading his consciousness, his presence distributed throughout the network without physical form. This existence has suited his philosophy, demonstrating that bodies are unnecessary for continued consciousness. Yet it has also limited his ability to affect events outside his domain, leaving him dependent on intermediaries and influence for action in physical reality. The manifestation occurs in Lane's room, the space that has become her primary location for engaging with the wired. The technology that fills this space provides the bridge across which Airy's consciousness travels, the equipment she has accumulated, creating pathways between digital and physical that he exploits for his entry. He does not simply appear, but rather constructs himself, matter assembling according to patterns imposed by will rather than biology. The result proves grotesque in ways that reveal the limitations of consciousness controlling physical form without the mediation of evolved embodiment. Airy's manifestation does not look human except in the vaguest approximation. His form incorporates flesh without the organizational principles that produce bodies, anatomy without the logic that makes anatomy functional. He has created a vessel for his presence without creating something that resembles life, the distinction between the two becoming horrifyingly apparent. This grotesquerie carries meaning beyond mere aesthetic failure. Airy has argued that bodies are unnecessary, that consciousness can exist without biological substrate, that the future he envisions represents advancement rather than loss. Yet his own attempt to create a body demonstrates that existence without evolved embodiment produces something monstrous rather than transcendent. The flesh he has assembled carries no grace, no beauty, no evidence of the millions of years of refinement that make biological bodies work. Alice is present when this manifestation occurs, her continued friendship with Lane having brought her into proximity with events she cannot comprehend. Her response to Airy's appearance combines terror with disbelief, her ordinary human consciousness unable to process what she is witnessing. The nightmare that has assembled itself before her contradicts everything she has understood about how reality operates, challenging sanity even as it threatens safety. Lane's response to Airy's manifestation draws on capabilities that have developed beyond anything she previously demonstrated. She opposes him not through argument or resistance, but through direct application of power that matches his own. The equipment surrounding them becomes weapon, technology she has accumulated, responding to her will and directing itself against the intrusion that threatens her and her friend. The confrontation between them takes forms that exceed physical combat, even as it occurs in physical space. They are both beings who exist partially in the wired, their conflict extending into digital realms, even as material effects occur in Lane's room. Airy attempts to assert the authority of creator over creation, to impose the purpose he designed upon the being who has refused it. Lane resists this imposition, her developed will opposing his original intention. The outcome demonstrates that Lane has exceeded her design parameters more thoroughly than either of them fully understood. She proves stronger than her creator, her power exceeding his in ways that he cannot overcome through the advantages of prior existence or distributed consciousness. The god of the wired has been surpassed by his own creation, his godhood revealed as lesser than what she has become. Airy's physical manifestation cannot survive the force Lane brings against it. His assembled flesh comes apart under assault from the equipment she directs, technology serving her will to destroy what his will created. The grotesque form that entered her room dissolves into components that never properly cohered, returning to the raw matter from which unearned existence forced temporary assembly. This destruction does not eliminate Airy entirely. His consciousness remains distributed throughout the wired, his presence persisting in digital form, even as his venture into physical reality proves disastrous. He has been defeated but not annihilated, diminished but not deleted from existence. His continued presence ensures that the threat he represents has been reduced rather than eliminated, contained rather than conclusively ended. Alice's condition, following this confrontation, reveals the cost of exposure to events that ordinary human consciousness cannot accommodate. She has witnessed things that cannot be integrated into normal understanding, experienced directly the violation of assumptions that make ordinary life possible. Her terror during the manifestation has given way to shock that resists immediate processing, her mind struggling to cope with input that contradicts everything she previously believed. Lain recognizes that Alice cannot simply continue as before, cannot carry the weight of what she has witnessed without consequences that may prove devastating. The friendship that has sustained Lain through her transformation has brought Alice into contact with forces that have damaged her, proximity to the extraordinary, leaving scars that ordinary healing cannot address. Love has led to harm, connection producing consequences that neither of them anticipated. This recognition shapes the decision Lain reaches about how to use the power she has discovered within herself. She cannot undo what has happened through any ordinary means, cannot simply talk Alice through experiences that exceed the capacity of conversation to address. The damage has been done at levels that require intervention at those same levels, editing of memory and experience that only Lain's unique capabilities can provide. The possibility of a more comprehensive solution presents itself as Lain contemplates what she might do. She could limit herself to helping Alice specifically, removing the memories that traumatize whilst leaving everything else intact. Or she could address the larger situation that produced those memories, eliminating not just the effects but the causes that made such effects possible. The power to reshape reality extends to reshaping it fundamentally, changing not just what people remember, but what actually occurred. Lain chooses the more comprehensive approach, recognizing that partial solutions will leave problems that continue generating harmful consequences. The events that traumatized Alice arose from circumstances that Lain's existence created. Other people have been affected by these circumstances, their lives disrupted by phenomena that should never have occurred. The damage extends beyond what helping Alice alone could address, requiring intervention at the level of cause rather than merely effect. The mechanism she employs for this intervention involves nothing less than rewriting history itself. She removes herself from the shared experience of humanity, eliminating the events her existence made possible by eliminating herself as their cause. This erasure extends backward through time, undoing not just recent memories, but the entire chain of occurrences that followed from her presence in the world. What never existed never caused harm, the wounds she inflicted healing through the erasure of their origin. The scope of this self-erasure exceeds anything Lain has previously attempted or imagined. She is not simply editing particular memories, but removing herself from the fabric of shared reality entirely. Every person who encountered her will lose that encounter. Every event she influenced will be altered to account for her absence. The world will be reshaped into a form where Laina Wakura never existed, never walked to school through suburban streets, never received messages from dead classmates, never became the focal point for conflict between gods and corporations. The implications of this choice reveal both its cost and its meaning. Lain is sacrificing not just her memories, but her entire existence as a participant in human reality. She will continue in some form, her consciousness persisting outside the reshaped world, but she will do so alone, separated from everyone she has known, by barriers more absolute than any physical distance could create. The isolation that characterized her existence will be perfected, her separation from others becoming complete through choice rather than circumstance. This sacrifice reflects the love that has developed through Lain's connection with Alice, and, through Alice, with the possibility of genuine human relationship. She chooses to give up participation in humanity, in order to protect humanity from the consequences of her participation. The friendship that anchored her to embodied existence becomes the reason for removing herself from that existence, care expressing itself through absence rather than presence. The mechanics of the reset ripple through reality, remaking the world according to Lane's will, exercised in service of others' well-being. Ares' modifications to Protocol 7 never occur because the circumstances that made them possible no longer exist. The Knights never organize around a god in the Wired because there is no god for them to worship. The strange events that disrupted ordinary life never happen because the being whose existence precipitated them never was. The world that emerges from this reset contains no memory of Lane or the events surrounding her. People who knew her continue their lives without the knowledge that something is missing, their experience seamlessly adjusted to account for her absence. The gaps that her removal creates fill themselves naturally, reality organizing around her non-existence, as if that non-existence represented the original state of affairs. Alice grows up in this reshaped world, her life proceeding along paths that the original timeline prevented. She becomes a teacher, her kindness finding expression through work with young people who benefit from her gentle guidance. She marries the teacher she once admired from a distance, the relationship that she previously explored only in private fantasy, developing into something real and lasting. Her life contains happiness that the original timeline threatened to destroy. Contentment that Lane's sacrifice has made possible. The classroom where she teaches fills each day with the voices of students who will never know that their teacher was once rescued from despair by someone they cannot remember, protected by love that erased itself so that other loves might flourish. The years pass in this reshaped reality, ordinary time unfolding without the disruptions that Lane's existence would have caused. Technology develops along paths that do not include the boundary violations Ares' work enabled. The Wired grows and changes, connecting people across distances without threatening to absorb them into itself. Humanity continues its complicated journey through history, facing challenges that do not include the particular crisis that Lane's existence represented. Yet something of the erased connection persists, despite the thoroughness of Lane's self-removal. When she observes Alice years after the reset, watching from whatever vantage her continued existence provides, something flickers in the older woman's expression. Recognition passes across features that should hold no memory of Lane, awareness of something familiar that cannot be placed or explained. The bond they shared proves stronger than the alteration that should have eliminated it, love persisting as trace even when its origin has been erased. This persistence suggests that certain connections exceed the reach of even godlike power to erase. The friendship between Lane and Alice touched something real enough to leave marks that reality reshaping cannot remove. Their bond exists somehow beneath or beyond the surface of shared memory, maintained in dimensions that Lane's editing did not access. Whatever they meant to each other continues mattering in ways that exceed what conscious awareness can track. Lane's final position represents acceptance of a role she did not choose, but has come to embrace. She exists between Wired and reality as guardian of the boundary that Ares sought to eliminate, her nature suited to this task in ways that his modifications inadvertently created. She watches over humanity from outside their experience, protecting them from threats they will never know existed. Her existence has found purpose, though that purpose requires perpetual separation from the beings she protects. The encounter with her father in this liminal space provides closure of a sort that earlier conversations could not achieve. Yasuo appears to her in a form that transcends his previous role as assigned guardian, his presence suggesting connection to dimensions of existence that his cover identity concealed. Their conversation addresses questions that have haunted Lane throughout her journey. Inquiries about the nature of reality and identity and the possibility of something transcendent underlying both. Yasuo offers no definitive answers to these ultimate questions, but his presence suggests that Lain's sacrifice has not gone unwitnessed by whatever powers operate behind the surface of ordinary existence. He speaks of love that has proved genuine despite artificial origins, feeling that developed through years of proximity, regardless of how that proximity was arranged. His words confirm that the emotion connecting them exceeds the manufactured circumstances from which it arose, that their bond carries meaning that transcends its engineered beginnings. The question of whether a true God exists receives acknowledgement without resolution. Lain has encountered claims of divinity from Eri, whose godhood proved limited and ultimately conquerable. She has experienced power that might qualify as divine, the ability to reshape reality according to will. Yet she has also encountered evidence suggesting that larger forces operate beyond what even she can perceive, powers whose nature and purposes exceed her comprehension. Her father's final words point toward mysteries that will remain unsolved, regardless of how much power Lain possesses or how long she continues existing. The universe contains depths that no being has fully plumbed, questions that no answer can completely address. Even gods must acknowledge limitations, must accept that existence extends beyond what any consciousness can grasp. The humility appropriate to finite beings remains appropriate to beings of vast power, though the scale of what remains unknown expands along with the scale of what is known. The closing images of the story present Lain in her position of eternal watchfulness, suspended in a space that belongs neither to the wired nor to physical reality, but to some interface between them. Her consciousness extends throughout the systems that connect humanity, perceiving the flow of data and communication that the wired enables. She senses the lives playing out within the network's reach, billions of experiences unfolding simultaneously without awareness of the guardian who watches over them. Her loneliness is real but chosen, isolation embraced as the condition for service, rather than suffered as the consequence of rejection. She has given up participation in human community in order to protect that community from forces that would destroy it. The sacrifice makes sense to her now, in ways it might not have before. She learned what love means and what it can demand of those who experience it genuinely. The humming of power lines that provided sonic backdrop throughout the narrative continues into this final image, electricity flowing through networks that Lain now supervises from her position outside conventional existence. The wired remains, continues growing, continues connecting human beings across distances that once seemed impassable. Yet it no longer threatens to absorb reality into itself. The danger Eri represented neutralized by the being he created but could not control. Lain's story thus concludes not with triumph in any conventional sense, but with acceptance of a situation that defies conventional categories entirely. She has won the conflict with Eri, whilst losing access to the ordinary human existence that victory was meant to protect. She has saved the world whilst removing herself from participation in that world's ongoing story. The outcome mixes loss and achievement in proportions that resist simple evaluation as happy or sad. The meaning of her experience transcends the particular events that comprised it. Her journey illuminates questions about identity and reality that extend beyond her individual case to touch on fundamental aspects of human existence. What makes a person real? Where do the boundaries of self lie? How do our technologies shape who we are and might become? These questions remain open, even as her story reaches its conclusion. The answers she has found being hers specifically rather than universal resolutions. The world goes on. People live their lives, form relationships, create meaning from the raw material of experience. They use the wired without knowing what it almost became, without awareness of the guardian who watches to ensure it remains tool rather than replacement for embodied existence. They are protected by a girl who never was, whose sacrifice erased the possibility of their ever knowing what she saved them from. And somewhere between the humming power lines, in the spaces where digital meets physical, Lain exists still, watching, protecting, loving from a distance that her nature makes unbridgeable, but her choice makes meaningful. She is everywhere and nowhere, connected to everyone whilst touching no one, the god of the wired who chose to remain its servant rather than its master. The wired pulses with life that she can feel but cannot join. Humanity going about its business in blessed ignorance of how close it came to transformation, it did not choose and might not have survived. Children play games that are merely games, their psychic energy remaining their own, rather than being harvested for others' purposes. Lovers communicate across distances, their messages carrying nothing more sinister than the ordinary hopes and fears of people trying to connect. The boundary between real and virtual holds, maintained by a guardian who understands both sides, because she belongs to neither entirely. Lain has become what Airi could not make himself, what he could not force her to become on his terms. She exists as bridge and barrier simultaneously, enabling connection whilst preventing merger, preserving the distinction between realms that makes relationship possible. Her watch continues as the years flow past in the reality she has reshaped. She sees Alice's children grow, sees the lives of people she knew in her previous existence develop along paths her removal made possible. She cannot participate, but she can care, her love expressing itself through protection rather than presence. The separation is painful but bearable, the cost of what she has chosen being offset by the value of what that choice preserves. The loneliness she experiences carries different quality than the isolation of her former life. Before, she was alone because no one reached her, because walls she had not chosen kept others at distance she did not want. Now she is alone because she chose separation in service of something she loves. The ache of it persists, but it is the ache of sacrifice rather than rejection, meaningful rather than empty. She watches the seasons turn in a world that has forgotten her. Spring brings blossoms to trees she used to pass on her way to school. Summer fills the streets with children whose laughter she can hear, but never join. Autumn paints the leaves in colors that remind her of warmth she once almost knew. Winter blankets everything in silence that echoes her own condition. The cycle continues without her, beautiful and complete in its indifference to her observation. In the quiet moments between monitoring and maintenance, Lain contemplates what it all means, and whether meaning itself is something that exists or something that is created. She has power that exceeds what most definitions of divinity would require, yet she does not feel like a god in any way that carries traditional connotations. She feels like someone doing a job that needs doing, fulfilling a role that her nature suits her for, serving others through sacrifice that her circumstances make possible. Perhaps that is what divinity actually means, when stripped of the ego and grandeur that beings like Airi bring to the concept. Not power exercised for its own sake, but capability devoted to the well-being of others. Not dominion over existence, but stewardship of possibilities that existence contains. Not the imposition of will upon reality, but the protection of reality from wills that would destroy it. These are the thoughts of a guardian in her eternal watch, reflections that provide companionship in solitude that would otherwise be unbearable. Lain has discovered that even isolation can be inhabited, that even separation can be meaningful, that even endings can open into something that resembles continuing rather than conclusion. The power lines continue humming their endless song, carrying data and electricity and the pulse of human communication across the world she watches over. The sound has become familiar, almost comforting, the voice of the system she has made her home. She listens to it as the hours pass, as days become years, become time beyond ordinary counting, and she finds in it a kind of peace. Somewhere below, in the world she can perceive but no longer inhabit, a woman who was once a girl named Alice pauses in her daily routine. Something has touched her awareness, some fragment of memory or connection that should not exist but does. She looks around as if expecting to see someone, then shakes her head and continues with what she was doing. She will never know what that feeling meant. She will never remember the friend who loved her enough to erase herself from existence. She will never understand why certain moments bring inexplicable emotion, why certain thoughts carry weight they should not possess, why her heart sometimes aches for losses she cannot name. But Lain knows. Watching from her place between worlds, Lain knows that what they shared persists in ways that even her reality reshaping power could not eliminate. The bond between them exists in dimensions she did not access, maintained by forces she does not fully understand. Their friendship has become part of something larger than either of them, incorporated into the structure of existence itself. This knowledge sustains her through the long watch, the endless maintenance, the sacrifice that must be continuously renewed rather than accomplished once and finished. She gave up human connection to protect human connection, and in doing so she did not eliminate the connection she gave up, but transformed it into something else. Love persists. That is what she has learned, what she clings to in the solitude that her choice requires. No power can erase it entirely. No distance can sever it completely. No sacrifice, however complete, can destroy what genuine caring creates between beings who have truly known each other. And so Lain watches and waits and loves from afar the world she has saved and the people she can never rejoin. The story ends, but her vigil continues, eternal guardian of the boundary between worlds, forever connected and forever alone, the girl who became a god by choosing to become a servant. Rest now. You are safe. The one who watches over the wired watches over you as well. The power lines hum their lullaby, and somewhere between the signals and the silence, Lain keeps her endless watch, protecting your sleep as she protects everything else. Let the humming carry you into dreams. Let the knowledge of protection ease you into rest. The boundaries hold. The guardian watches. And tomorrow the world will continue, unaware of what preserves it, unaware of the love that surrounds it, unaware of everything except the ordinary miracle of another day. Sleep now. You are not alone. You are never alone. Everyone is connected, and somewhere in that connection, somewhere in the space between waking and dreaming, between real and virtual, between what was and what is, Lain is there, watching, always watching.